everyone, James Williams, back with you following a great session with Chief Strategy Officer Simeon Coney from Anea Adaptive Mobile, giving you the hit parade, shall we say, of his top 5 frauds across telecoms, and in particular, of course, messaging. So thank you very much to Simeon and Anea Adaptive Mobile. Now moving to a session sponsored by Infobip. And this is another session sponsored by Infobip, so thank you to them. And this is, unsurprisingly again, because we're now on the fraud track, looking at the whole area of bad actors, looking at the whole area of fraud as a whole in telecoms. Now, I've kept this one specifically very open, so the field is going to be open for all my speakers today to talk about fraud from every single angle, because I've got a great variety of speakers here. So first up, I'd like to introduce John Murtagh, who is Senior Partner Products from Infobip.
Hi, James. John here.
Hello, John. We can't see you, I understand, but
I'm trying to get my camera working, so I'm not sure.
No problem. I'll come back to you. So okay. Sorry to do that. No problem. So John has ducked out and will be back. So let's go with Noah Rafalko, who is the CEO of TSG Global. Hi, Noah.
Hi, James. How are you today?
Fantastic. Good to see you. The last time, the first time I ever saw you and met you was at ITW this year. And it's a pleasure seeing you also now as a member of the wider MEF community, and looking forward to have your input here. Could you just introduce yourself and your company?
Sure. My name is Noah Rafalko. I'm the CEO and founder of TSG Global and the inventor of TNID, which is a telephone number identity service. And I've been in telecom for several decades, which I'll only admit that far back. So thank you for having me. I've seen a lot of fraud and looking forward to adding to the conversation.
Oh, there is a lot. Thank you so much. There is a lot. We're going to get straight into it. Let's welcome John back, because I understand we can see you now, John.
Hey, yeah. Hi, James. Eventually figured it out.
Hello, great to see you. So John is from Infobip. I've known John for many years, very active across MEF. And Simeon mentioned home routing, and John and his team back in the day actually invented the process of home routing. So if you guys know out there know what home routing is deployed globally, it's all thanks to John. So it's safe to say there's a lot of experience sitting with you. So what's your role within Infobip now, John?
I'm working in the product division, so specifically focused on telco, and a large part of that is around identity and the security side of things. So obviously the firewalling for our partners on the mobile network operator side is
fantastic.
A strong part of my focus. But but again, with Infobip, there's a wider ecosystem perspective in play for myself personally.
I know you're very global and have offices across dozens of countries around the world. So thank you for joining. Next up, I'd like to introduce Allister Fraser.
Hello. Thanks for having me, James.
Hey, Allister. Good seeing you again. So Allister is with introduce your business area. And
so I think the people on this call will all, well, I'm sure they'll all know EE as a mobile network operator here in the UK. EE is fully owned by BT, which people will know because they might well get their broadband from them. But what the audience might not realize is that EE is working with the other major mobile network operators in the UK in order to share our customer data for agreed purposes to help prevent our customers from being victims of fraud.
Yeah, that's key. So you're perfect. You're the epitome of collaboration in the MNO sphere. So fantastic having you with us. Next up, Eugene Pradas. So Gene, SVP Global Strategic Development with BTS.
How you doing, James? Good to see you. It's great. Thanks for the MEF team for putting all this together, and also for Infobip for sponsoring this segment.
Good seeing you, because I know you personally are very active within our fraud and revenue assurance group as well. So great having you here. Just introduce BTS. Go for it.
Well, BTS, we're a global technology solutions provider. We provide digital voice, SMS service, CPaaS offerings, global numbering, and a lot of technology consultancy as well on a global stage.
I think you're top 5 in world wholesale voice as well. So very, very big player, well-known player across the industry. I'd also like to introduce Joanna Kuligowska, who's Head of Global Market Intelligence with HAUD. Hi,
James.
Joanna.
How are you?
Hi. Good, thank you. Introduce your company.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joanna Kuligowska. I work as Head of Global Market Intelligence at HAUD. We are a technology vendor helping our customers globally to fully securitize and monetize their messaging revenues. I'm really glad to be here in such a great panel. Thanks for having me.
No, we're most welcome. So in simple language, firewalls. We were just talking about firewalls before. Super hypercritical to protect.
We like to call it enforcement, but yes, I know what you mean.
There we go. There's more as well. So we've got that. And last but by no means least, Mr. Yasser Waheed, Director of Global Messaging with Kaleyra. Hey, Yasser. If you unmute yourself, there we go. Yeah, hi.
Hi, everybody. Great to be on in this panel. Great folks here, and there's a lot we can cover, but I think James will want to wrap up for the day. So I'm Yasser. I'm with Kaleyra Global CPaaS. We are involved predominantly in enterprise, so we see a lot of great enterprise opportunities, but we also see how there are ways around the enterprise so that fraud can be committed. Hopefully, we can at least shed a bit of light.
Absolutely. Thank you, Yasser. So Kaleyra has got an offshoot company called the Campaign Registry, also MEF members, and very, very active. And anyone in the US will have heard of the Campaign Registry as well. I think Yasser has frozen a little bit, so we'll come back to Yasser later. But let's start things off. I very, very rarely have the same question for all panelists. But I'm going to start off with this one, 1 to 10, 1 being absolutely terrible, 10 being supremely amazing. Let's all go on holiday. How do you think we as an industry are doing at combating fraud, given fraud is on the up and up? So 1 to 10, John, very quick answer, please.
Very quick. I would say 8. I think some good things have been done. SMS, I think it's relatively secured. We can see that the business HP SMS is still really growing and successful. There's not total trust, but there is a relatively amount of trust in it compared to let's say the email channel. There's more to do, of course. I just caught the end of your last speaker. I totally agree. We're at a B. We need to get to an A. We never be full A+. It's always more to do. We see more to do on newer channels of fraud, on MMS, voice, and things like that, where the fraud is always moving to weak entry points.
Yes, thank you.
And when I say we, I mean the whole ecosystem. We need to do that more.
Yeah, Noah, the same question to you.
Well, I'm going to be a little bit more conservative and give it a rating of a 4. Because to the earlier points, we're not sharing enough information globally to really make a dent in their accelerated fraud attempts. I think the fraud is accelerating faster than our attempts to join forces against them, which puts us at a slight disadvantage, but we are in a upward motion. So, even stats that I've seen over the past several years, even though the fraud has grown, it's grown at a lesser amount. So to John's point, we are doing some damage to it.
Yeah, fantastic. Allister, over to you.
So do you know what? I'm not going to give a number. And the reason I'm not going to give a number is because I don't claim to be a fraud expert. Far from it. What I do, though, is I work with people who are fraud experts. And so what I can say is I've seen things, they sort of describe fraud as a game of whack-a-mole and things are changing. So when we started to share data with companies that were looking to spot and mitigate against fraud, we were seeing a lot, or the banks were seeing a lot of SIM swap fraud. So the mobile network operators, they shared SIM swap information. You pass us a mobile phone number and we'll give you a date and a timestamp as to when that SIM was last swapped to help them determine a level of risk. We're now working with banks on authorized push payments, and they're saying authorized push payments fraud is going through the roof. So as EE, we're not seeing this directly, but we're hearing it from our partners. and we're hearing that the fraud numbers are going up, and there's never been, and as more and more regulation is coming out, never have we seen as much demand for our information. So that's what I can say.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Gene, same to you.
Well, I'll tell you, my original point was to give like an 8, but after listening to your last presentation, I think I'm dropping to 6.5. I mean, I think that, as mentioned, we're moving. It's a moving target. So as Allister says, it's tough to put any number. I mean, we're passing because we're dealing with so many variables, part of the whole system. But there's still quite a bit of fraud in going on, and a lot of it is just it's of our own making because of the different variables. I mean, fraudsters. I mean, you have the fraudsters, you got the transporters, you got the end users, and so many things are involved that we can get into as we discuss this. But I go 6.5 and pushing. I think we pass, but there's a lot more to go.
Okay, thank you, Gene. And Joanna, same to you.
It's a difficult question because different regions are very different when it comes to how they attack fraud. I would probably give it a 5. I think we've done quite a lot as an industry, but still every day globally consumers get affected, impacted, and they're losing money. Same with brands, enterprises. We had it in the previous session that also enterprises get affected by fraud. I think there's still so much to do, especially around sharing data, awareness, raising awareness, really increasing the education around fraud, especially because it's such an evolving threat and such a highly incentivized threat. And I think definitely much more to do on the collaboration part. So yeah, 5 from me.
Okay, thank you. And Yasser. You're on mute, sir.
Sorry, everybody. Simple question, difficult answers. I was going to go with a 5 just because it looks like we're making headway, but unfortunately, it's like a sinusoidal curve, right? Everybody seems to think we've got this covered, and then something new happens, or you see other ways around solutions in place. So 4.5 maybe, but this is a moving target for everybody, and we all need to collaborate and create awareness on the subscriber side as well. So it's not just us as an industry saying this is how we need to do it, but the consumers and the channels they prefer, they need to be made aware as well.
Okay, thank you. Noah, very, very simple question to you. Why are we seeing more fraud across telco in general? What's been happening?
We don't get along with sharing information. We have the most secure, ironically, we have the most secure supply chain out there, except we only allow one deep or parent-child relationships. We don't have, we haven't until this point had the technology to allow us to actually share across multiple organizations that are highly competitive, because telecommunications is so highly competitive. To your earlier point, it's a race to zero for the price. And the value proposition really doesn't come across very well when you say, well, you have to pay a little bit more for secure traffic or non-gray routes. We're driven by price, but manipulated by fraud. So I think that the fraudsters can look at us and say, it's a broken supply chain. We can just enter ourselves and inject ourselves where those weaknesses are. And by the time they catch us, we move on. So I do see that there's an opportunity, again, to Allister's point. It really comes into how can you share information without breaking privacy or confidentiality of those users and their data. So I would say that there's a lot of work to do when it comes to supply chain management, but we are all professionals in that today. We just have to use newer technology to facilitate that sharing in a more global way.
Fantastic, thank you. John, the same question to you.
Well, I think simply why? I think one, the fraudsters themselves are getting much better. They're almost psychologists. You can see that from the social engineering sometimes, you look at subscriber level fraud. The other thing is the financial returns are really, really attractive, both on the on those frauds that attack end users, subscribers. That the financial returns are really, really good, and the fraudsters will pay for the traffic. It's not they don't need to use free routes anymore. They will actually pay for it because they know the return is coming somewhere else. On the revenue-related fraud, it's the costs are going up. There's so much to be made on margins. Again, it's economic financial return, which is driving a whole industry in parallel with our industry. That's the main reasons I would see.
Thank you, Joanna. Over to you. Is there a new type of fraud? Has a new type of fraudster arrived in telecoms? So John talked about an increased sophistication. Is that what you're seeing? So the types of attacks have changed perhaps in the past year or two, have got a lot more sophisticated. And is that simply down to now mobile payments, telecoms, etc., being so valuable?
Absolutely. I would say that the sophistication of fraud has increased, and if we look at 2 years, it has increased tremendously, but it even had increased in the last 3 months, 6 months. We see it as a constantly evolving threat. And I don't think particular there is a specific new emerging type of fraud, but new types of the same fraud keep on emerging every single day. And the fraudsters are using more and more convincing methods, and they've learned so well to mimic. And that's something you actually spoke about with.
I was going to mention that example that was used in the previous session.
And I found it very interesting because it's exactly what we see. And that example of a fraudulent message that was more professional than the legitimate message coming from a brand, it really shows that those really incentivized individuals or companies that make millions of dollars every month from fraud, they actually go to great lengths and great efforts to make sure that they stay ahead of the curve. That's something that we see every day, and that is in relation to sort of brand phishing and smishing, but also those typically wholesale frauds such as artificial traffic inflation that has got from basic to very sophisticated in the last, I would say, 6 months. So if we look, for instance, how SIM boxes were, 5 years ago, they were so easy to detect, and then obviously they evolved over time to very much being resembling and normal subscriber behavior, and in the same way we see those types of frauds evolving every single day.
Because there's a real evolution. We've got a new type of bad actor in play here. Now, Noah was talking about the fact that he didn't think that because of the competition, we need more collaboration, that people might not be as collaborating as much as they can at the moment. But Allister, can you just talk about what's going on in your area with the mobile network operators in the UK? And do you feel there's a real sense of collaboration there with the operators in the UK to get something done?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So just to put it into context, a few years ago, companies were, smaller operators were dipping into the SS7, taking data and reselling it to like tier 1 banks in the UK, helping the tier 1 banks to prevent fraud. What with GDPR and what have you, the way we handle personal information, the mobile network operators couldn't really allow that to continue, but nor did they want to block it, because at the end of the day, it was helping prevent our customers, mutual customers, from becoming victims of fraud. So EE, O2, Vodafone, and 3 are working together with our customers, which ranges from banks to hospitality to insurance companies, and we are creating APIs in order to easily share customers' personal data in a way that we can monitor and in a way that is very secure. So we've got a number of APIs today out, like I mentioned earlier, like SIM swap APIs that can help the banks to detect, or basically all the people on the call now who are sending one-time passwords via SMS. It's not just banks, it's across all industries. They can tell whether when a SIM was last swapped in handset, which could potentially highlight an account takeover, right, by a bad actor. The mobile network operators have made it much harder now for you to order new SIM cards and things. So, we working alongside with the banks and the other mobile network operators have realized that, the fraudsters are it's APP fraud, this authorized push payments. They're just calling up the victims. They've got a script written by psychologists, as was mentioned earlier in this call, very convincing, terrify people that they're going to lose all their money. And basically they've stolen the bank details. They just need to get the PIN code. They instigate the sending of the PIN from the bank, and they just get the victim to read the PIN code out. So we work with the other operators in order to do. We're working with the other operators right now and the banks in order to be able to share real-time information with the banks to help them spot this authorized push payment fraud. And we also have things like number verify APIs. So rather than sending a one-time password via SMS anyway, you can call our number verify API and get the network to confirm possession of the handset in the background using the EE network, right? Or O2 network or Vodafone network or 3 network. So you don't send a one-time password via SMS at all, so that the victim can't be socially engineered because they never received a PIN code in order to in the first place. So we've got a number of APIs, and we meet monthly, and companies that are out there trying to stop fraud and are constantly evolving it will tell us what the problems are. We'll tell them what data we're sitting on, which is tons of verified data. And they will help us to build new APIs to share customer information to, again, continue to fight the evolving fraud.
Okay, so it's clearly working, that collaboration between mobile network operators here within the UK. So it seems
Definitely.
to be a role model, something that could be used elsewhere. Gene, coming to you, BTS is a global organization. You've got a truckload of experience from around the world yourself, and you've traveled a lot. Are you seeing this type of collaboration that's here in the UK that Allister was talking about between mobile operators popping up more and more, or is there still really this distrust, should I say, and this lack of collaboration in play between operators in the same country?
Well, James, I think I would first start by saying I think we need to admit that, fraud is big business, all right? And the bottom line is, why is fraud? Why does it exist? And it has to do with, like I said earlier, the different variables. It could be an organization. Many organizations preach that they're fighting against fraud, but when it's the end of the quarter and they need some top line, they'll do whatever they need to do to get that top line, all right? And that's basically fraud as well, right? And so it depends where it's coming from. There's, collaboration. There's a lot of groups like the Forum, MEF, C-Band. They're all working towards addressing fraud issues. So that's why my rating was a 6.5, because I think we're doing things to address it. But the firsters are technology is there for them and for us. I mean, we have, we're using AI technologies, we're using algorithms, we're using all types of technology to route our business, and that technology also involves in fraud detection. Right? So we're fighting on both sides. Collaboration, of course, and like I said, and Allister mentioned, and again Noah as well, is this is an industry where we give out information, but we give out certain information. So we don't want to give out information on our customer base, basically, because of the competitiveness. But we all know that certain people are doing things behind their backs versus what they're saying out in public, right? So there is that part. There's the part of education which was mentioned. Now, education, I mean, in your last session as well, the end user education. But the fact is that if you look at any advertising, retail advertising of mobile operators or any type of operators, no one talks about hey, if you see this kind of call coming in, red alert. You know,
it's very few do. I've actually seen a couple abroad. There was a really good one, I think, in Singapore, where a massive brand did go full tilt actually at that. You would never expect that, and that was fantastic. Very positive.
I would congratulate those people that are doing that, because what they don't want to do, which is again image-wise, you don't want to, you know, this is a clear image situation.
And that's it. We have some players within the sender ID registries who don't want to be known as being part of the program, because they're scared of thinking, hang on a second, if my brand is known as being part of the program, that means I'm being impacted by fraud. But hang on, every single company on the planet is impacted by fraud. So we've got to face up to it and collaborate.
And that's why MEF's code of conduct is very important.
Yeah, for business,
other organizations, you know, if you're up at MEF's code of conduct, I mean, basically, I mean, you're saying that you're doing something, and you know, you can't prevent all of it, all right? Because as your other candidates, other people have mentioned, you don't want to block legitimate traffic. All right, you do your best to identify which is not legitimate, but you don't want to block legitimate traffic for all the repercussions that come after that.
Thanks. John, can I come back to you? Do you think mobile network operators are doing enough? We've talked in previous sessions, and you know yourself, certain types of fraud can only be stopped by mobile network operators. Are they doing enough? Are they quite literally getting the message? And if not, what do we need to do differently to make sure they do?
I think they are, James. The mobile network operators are actually regulated, so there is an obligation from the regulators, and we do know certainly the regulators are putting a lot more focus on fraud detection and fraud management. Some of the operators are hampered, you know, maybe through the same regulation. We think there can be some movement there in terms of being able to, you know, obviously Allister mentioned privacy and GDPR, and that's really, really important from the industry as well. But sometimes it's in conflict and hampers the operators. So we think there's maybe something a bit more that can be done there, because at the end of the day, the technology and the services the operators want to implement can be fine-tuned to stop this activity that regulator also is wanting to stop. You know, it is, some of this fraud is of criminal nature. So stopping crime and but doing it within the privacy. I
was about to say that, because Allister, you mentioned something great, and the fact that you hit the area of GDPR straight on, and you mentioned that you were able to collaborate, the operators in the UK, under GDPR and get a real result. So Yasser, can I just come to you? And you've been around the industry a long time. You started off in voice, you're now in SMS, messaging, CPaaS, etc. after a number of years. Are you seeing this whole GDPR and privacy thing as being a really nice, should we say, excuse for some people to say, I can't do it because of GDPR or whatever variant of that might be in play in a country? Is that something you're seeing, you've noticed?
That's a very interesting way of looking at it. I would go further and say it's not. It shouldn't be considered as a GDPR issue or a non-GDPR issue. Fraudsters will take their play wherever it takes them, but
I'm talking about when it comes to protecting with the likes of operators and others and other players, not just operators. It's messaging companies, it's other stakeholders, enterprises going, we can't do that because it's our customer data, it's against GDPR. But they haven't really looked to see actually if a collaborative initiative is really possible.
That's very true. And I would even say that GDPR is good, so the regulators, the operators, the consumers are all working hand in hand. But we've seen a huge uptick in fraud in less mature markets. So those will always be targeted, whether we want to recognize that or not. Places like Brazil or India, we're seeing massive upticks in smishing in those regions. And the type of the smishing or fraud, there's everyone here would be aware that there's generated traffic, there's inflated traffic, there's URL switch attempts, sender ID manipulation. We can all do URL takedown in one way or another, but it's the more sophisticated ones where you don't know whether this is actually happening or not. This is where people like Allister would know better that, yes, we've pinpointed this and we know how to take this forward. So where there is GDPR and compliance, that kind of intel would be great to share with less mature markets where they can potentially implement and find similarities that they could target and fine tune.
Okay, thanks. Noah, I'd like to come to you. So we know from so much industry research that there is huge untapped headroom for growth with business messaging, particularly in the smaller and medium-sized enterprises, of which there are quite literally tens of millions, if not several hundred million globally. So we know that. What can we as an industry do, though, I know it's education, but how do we do it? What can we as an industry do to get the message across, again, quite literally, on the commercial model, the price side of things? So I go back to, I think, the example I used in my previous session, where a country, the typical price might say be 6 euro cents, but someone is coming along offering 2 euro cents. It's extremely tempting. I'm going to go for the cheapest thing. But by doing so, they've aligned themselves with a suboptimal supplier who might not have the best intentions. How do we stop that? Because at the end of the day, we need to have any chance of success.
Well, that's a great question. And I remember one of the stats you had given about the A2P messaging market, and that there's over 350 million
yeah, that was mobile squared. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was very interesting, and that we've tapped into less than 5% of that market. So how you lure people to spend more money is you teach them how to make more money. But in that lesson, how do you solve for this issue? And I described this yesterday to someone on a call. I said, well, right now, how we're watching fraud is generally on the recipient side, right? We're basically having a border between two countries, but we're only watching what's coming into the country through the customs, right? And every good border crossing has two customs entities. There's the sender and the receiver. So if we can not just have all this logic on the recipient side and identity management on the recipient side, but really create the identity from the starting point, the carriers that are originating the messaging, or use a specific telephone number or sender ID. If it's tracked from the origin and then meets at the border crossing to the customs agent, let's say on the other side, on the recipient side, then we can solve for a lot of these issues. And I do think it comes into how do you share cross-border information? Well, it's usually a standard amount of information. You have a passport. Each country agrees to a passport. Each country agrees to add a station to get that passport. Can fraud still happen? Can someone fake a passport? Absolutely. But it's a lot less often than what's going on today. What's going on today is anybody who wants to come into a network literally doesn't necessarily have to have a passport. You can get temporary passports. Like Simeon just said, the URLs that you can acquire are so inexpensive. So aren't telephone numbers. The origin side of this has to be held accountable. And as soon as we can start doing that, we can lower the friction.
It goes again what I was saying in the previous session. If you join me for that, domain name registrars. Any one of us listening or on this panel, watching can just rock up to any domain name registrar, or sorry, let's say not any, but quite a few, and they'd quite happily take our money if we wanted to buy 50,000 of something which looked something very familiar. They quite happily take our name on that. And it's like what you said about number ranges. There are going to be some bad actors out there who have no hesitation giving you a block of a huge numbers, not asking why you actually want to use it.
But James,
and that's where reputation management comes in too, James.
Yes,
right.
So,
reputation and stakeholder reputation has to be held accountable from the origin all the way to the recipient.
But but also, as Noah says, it's the sender. I mean, we also leave the space open. Adding surcharges. The more surcharges, OBRs, etc., that invites people to get involved because of the price difference, as you said earlier, 2 cents versus 6 cents. The session on decommission of 2G, 3G. I mean, by 2023 we'll still have there'll be half of the 2Gs are still around. The 3Gs is 37%. I mean, that invites fraudsters to come in, and we're giving them the playing field. So we have to limit it from the sender. I totally agree, and as well as the recipient. I like the analogy with the passport.
Folks, we're coming to the end of the session. The time rolls so fast. And Joanna, final comment from you. What do we need to do as an industry? I know we've talked about education, but specifically, is there one thing you think that we could be doing better?
So, I will always say education, awareness, collaboration, but I wanted to bring one point just because you asked about SMS pricing. I think the pricing model for SMS is outdated, and it really incentivizes sort of normalizing fraud as a way of reducing costs for routing of SMS. So I really think we should be looking as an industry into charging messaging based on value, priority, rather than transaction. And that can not only help to solve that using of cheap routes, fraudulent routes for termination, but also can actually bring us to the increase in search of new use cases that right now are left on the floor, and that growth that we've been talking about that can be achievable. So that's my
It's stopping this race to the bottom and stopping people from piling in behind it when something gets so tempting. Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's it from me. Fantastic.
Thank you very much. John, closing remark.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the ecosystem here. You've talked about the MNO responsibility, but I do see as a wider ecosystem, if we're going to look at things like sender registration, with what two previous speakers spoke about, where that requires the whole ecosystem to get involved in that activity. I do agree with the point. The sender is not certainly in the SMS world. It's totally spoofable, totally unverified. So that is something that we in the ecosystem can work on together in creating systems around that to at least provide identity.
And Allister, something from you.
Well, collaboration has come up a number of times on this call. Hopefully EE, O2, Vodafone and 3 are a good example of collaboration, and in terms of regulation, as long as we're working closely with the regulators as well, what we're looking to do is to provide insights to help companies adhere to the most recent regulations.
Fantastic. That's it, folks. We're at the end of our session. I think we would have really needed another 20 or 30 minutes to do this justice, because it's such a wide topic. But I wanted to keep it wide because it's such a broad area, and we've touched on everything. Commercial model, regulation. We've talked about collaboration, and collaboration works, and mobile network operators can collaborate together fairly in an antitrust way, which benefits all as well. So it is absolutely possible. So thank you very much to John Murtagh from Infobip, who sponsored this session, Yasser over in Miami with Kaleyra, Eugene from BTS, Joanna from HAUD, Noah, real pleasure having you on board as well within MEF, from TSG Global, and Allister thank you from EE and BT. Much appreciated. And
thank you,
look
James.
forward
Thank you,
to the
James.
next session.
Thanks
Thank
as
you.
well.
Thank you so much, guys.
Bye. Bye.